Hello! Here I want to guide you to the new transient recorder function. In order to do so, let's build a simple network for a transient short circuit test. It consists of a three-phase source with integrated transient, subtransient and stationary reactances. In order to run the example, I go first to the switch to set up the right switching sequence. So I go first to a CO switching mode. I start with an open breaker, and then I close after 300 milliseconds, reopen after 700 milliseconds. So now the switch is set up correctly. Now let's go for the timer, for the timing. So I want to run the whole thing for 1 second so that I get the total overview. So here 1 second, and I need about 10,000 points to be accurate enough with the calculation. So let's run it now, and you see this is what it has. So the switch is open at the beginning, so I see the voltage across the switch. Then I close the switch and I get the transient subtransient current, and then reopening of the switch. However, there is a much better way to do the same thing. So before I start the simulation, I push the transient recorder button there. Now the transient recorder is on record. I do not have to simulate for 1 second now. I just go for 20 milliseconds and 200 simulation points. And after the simulation is done, I stop the transient recorder. And now everything which I recorded is available. And I can now, with the sliders at the bottom, I can zoom in to those areas of the simulation which are of interest for me. For example, I want to see what happens around the current zero before current interruption. And I can, for example, take away those traces which are of less interest so that I can unload the whole transient record. I can manage the visibility of the traces on the list of all the traces which is on the left side of the screen. If I push on a trace which is not visible here, I click on a trace, then it appears again in the screen. I do it now, click, and I can click a second one, and then it's visible, and I can make it invisible again by clicking a second time. If with the mouse I hit one of the traces, then I get an indication by a red square on the element which belongs to the trace I just touched with the mouse. As you can see here, it belongs to the switch. I can do even better. Instead of stopping the transient recorder by hand after a while, I can right click on the transient recorder and set the recording time. I put it to 1 second now, and now I do not have to stop the transient recorder manually anymore. It stops after 1 second, as you can see now. The best way to do it, however, is that you first fix the length of the recording time in the transient recorder, and then you synchronize the switch with the transient recorder. So the switching sequence starts only once the transient recorder has been activated. So before that, you can now launch the simulation and you can prepare all the setups properly. For example, you can change the voltage of your source, and you see nothing happens on the switching sequence side. It's only when you trigger the transient recorder manually that then the whole thing starts. I can re-export the recorded data into a CSV file. This can be later re-imported by programs such as Excel. I will demonstrate the case. I can export as many data as I want, so I can reduce, for example, the record length a little bit, as I have just done by the sliders. Now I set the file name, test something, and then I push OK, and then the file will be downloaded in the download folder of my computer. That's what I have done now. And now I switch to Excel, and in Excel I re-import these data. So you see these are now the traces which have been re-imported, and I can now create, for example, another graphics in Excel. And this is a very nice feature which you can use for other purposes as well. Here is another example of a short circuit in the middle of a 400 km transmission corridor. On the left side we build a substation connecting a 300 MVA generator with integrated transient features to two parallel transmission lines. At the midpoint of one of the lines we build a short circuit, basically a switch. This line is equipped with breakers at both ends. On the right side we build another source, an infinite bus connected by a longer line, and we also connect the heavy load. Once the network is set up, we enter the right switching sequence to the switches. The sequence shall be triggered by the transient recorder. Let's not forget to set the length of the record. It shall start before the introduction of the short and stop well after the clearance and reconnection of the lines. Start the simulation, increase the power generation and adjust the terminal voltage. Push the TR button to start the record together with the switching sequence. This was very quick. Now you can zoom into the result and export the data if you wish to do so. There is a lot to learn. Go to my homepage on www.ecsb.ch. There you can access this program. There is a free version as well.